because I wanted to come in, and I did come in to request or review the budget. And in the legals, it said anybody that can appear or come in can see that. I came in and talked to the superintendent and asked to see that, you know, and he would told me that, because I have the RCW here that I brought in, that they got it sent in a timely fashion. The question that I asked was to see that, the budget, which is what, you know, said in here that I could request to see that. And then I asked again to see the budget, and he said that Jeanette was tweaking it and she didn't like it to come out unless it was done. So I asked a couple of times. We went on to another topic, and I left, and I think that it was illegal for me not to see that at the point that I asked for it. And, you know, that's just, you don't put something in there as a board and the district and not let me see that. I did get a copy, and I came in on the 5th, and it was printed on August 1st. If somebody would have called me, I would have come down and got it. You guys have my email, you have my phone. I would have come down to get it. And I just think that it was illegal for me not to get it at the time that I came in.
Eleanor, I just have some clarifying questions. So you came in on what date and asked
August
for it?
1st.
Okay.
August 1st.
And then were not able to receive it at that time?
No.
And then you came back on the 5th, got
Yes.
it on the 5th, but
Got
it's dated the
It's
1st?
dated, yes.
And we're not notified?
Yes.
Okay,
was
just
not-
wanted to clarify,
I
because you
mean,
kept saying I was come in, but I didn't know what
I
date.
can give you my document. I can give you, yeah. And so
Okay.
I got it about 4:15 on Monday, you know. And I study budgets. I mean, I've been in the financing arena. 30 years I was in the financing arena, and I was also on city council over 15 years. So I have always studied budgets. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, oh, I forgot. I did not get the 4-year one, because in the RCW it says I would get the 1920 and the 4-year one. I did not receive that when I picked this up on the 5th.
Did you ask for the 4-year one on the 1st? Or you just asked for the budget?
Yeah, when I looked at the RCW, I asked for the budget, and in the paragraph, let me look at the paragraph, and it tells you that probably at the time when I was asking for the budget, I expected to get both of them. And I have not received that. Thank you.
So I want the board to
only thing was there was a miscommunication which allowed me to give that F-195 report to those two committee members a few days late.
Well, for the record,
Yep.
to the board too, I mean.
Yes,
it
and to the
was-
board as
There was
well.
no malice, it
was no malice
it was-
at all.
I don't think you're trying to hold it back from us.
No, absolutely
anybody,
not.
okay.
Absolutely not.
But I do still have a question about the four-year
Mhm.
plan. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we looked up the RCW as well, and I think Jeanette can share some light on the conversation that we had with ESD 123 on that.
Okay, are we on? Yes. So as you guys know, the four-year budget was new starting last budget season. And there was a lot of back and forth as far as deadlines go. I didn't realize that the RCW for the four-year budget applies July 10th. My understanding from last budget cycle and recent conversations through the WASBO organization was that that budget, or that four-year budget deadline was after the F-195, so you get your F-195, you know, stamped by the ESD, and then your four-year budget goes after that. Excuse me, that was my understanding. I've since consulted the ESD to get some latest information, and they've said, no, it's July 10th. It's the way the RCW reads. So that was my misunderstanding. I didn't realize that. I always do the four-year budget after I get the first year good and solid, just because that's your base year, so you want that good and solid before you forecast. So, apologies, that was my bad. I didn't realize.
So for next year,
Yeah,
July
next year it'll
10th,
be
we
included.
will have the preliminary budget and the four-year projection.
Yes,
Okay,
in draft.
thank you. I wasn't aware of the four-year projection requirement for July 10th as well, so
So
we're used to
when,
seeing that later.
when was the four-year completed in its draft form this round?
So I just got the green light from the ESD for our budget on Friday, which was after I submitted the document.
Sorry.
May I clarify also? I just want to share to the board that Jeanette and I talked, this is typically a process that takes several months, the budgeting process. Typically it is begun anywhere in January to late, really March timeframe, and March is kind of late. Just to realize, just to share with the board that Jeanette came here on March the 13th, and she has been diligent and has been working hard on the budget. So just wanted to share that with the board. I certainly commend her and her actions. So in a time frame of 2 months and 2 weeks, she's been able to turn it around. So just wanted to point that out as well.
You meant June the 13th, right?
Sorry, yes.
I started May 13th, just
May
for the
13th.
record.
Okay.
Anyways. Mike? Okay. So I got the green light from the ESD on our 1920 budget on Friday, which was after I submitted the presentation in the F-195 to you guys for board docs. And so the F-195F, or sorry, the four-year budget, which is the F-195F, I completed that on Friday, right after I got the green light from the ESD. I had it worked up, I just made the final adjustments that were necessary.
Any other questions for the board for clarification on this issue?
So the F-195 was available on the 25th
In draft form, yes.
in draft form?
Yes.
So was there an understanding, I mean, when there was a request for the budget, was there an understanding that there was a request for something else other than the F-195? If it was ready on that day?
I mean, typically it's the F-195. It just somewhat depends. Some people prefer like a summary version versus the full version. So that's why typically, like, if there's a request, I ask for clarification of what do you specifically want? Because some people don't want the full document because there's so many pages and it's not that great of a read.
So on that day, what was the understanding?
So my understanding, when the two committee members came in, it was strictly talking about the F-195. There was no conversation about the four-year budget. And again, I take responsibility. I did not know it was ready in complete form, so I said August the 5th would be ready in complete form.
Is the board supposed to also be approving the F-195F by a certain date?
So the same deadlines apply. You guys
Okay.
don't put values in your resolution, which is the approval piece, right? So you don't put values in your resolution for your F-195F, but the resolution, the four-year budget, anyways. In the presentation and in the resolution, it states like, we've seen the four-year projections and we're signing off on them kind of thing. So they're in the presentation,
Okay.
but you're not approving like an authority level or anything like you are for the 1920.
Rob, I have one more thing. When I came in, and you can ask any school board or any city council member that I ever served with, and I served under 4 mayors, first thing I ever did was pull an RCW to know the law. I tried to give it to Dr. Hurst when I came in, and it tells you here what we should have. And he didn't take it.
So I just want to respond to that. I had Sandra Villarreal in the office with me. There was never a time when you presented that RCW to me.
First thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had my witness
I
here.
respectfully disagree.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So, obviously, there's been some human error. If you feel like it was purposely withheld from you, I'm sorry for that. Hopefully, in this past week, it's been enough time for you to look at the budget and come up with any questions. But it doesn't sound like you have any questions about the budget.
No,
You
I'm
just
gonna
wanna
look at
bring that up.
the detailed one. You know, budget that she's gonna present. Yeah,
Okay. All right, thank you.
thank you.
So I know that this is actually, in 12 years, might be the first time we've ever had anyone speak at a budget hearing, so it's good that people are here, but because of that, maybe not everyone knows that they can ask questions about the budget. So I'm going to invite any other citizens, because we block off some time for citizens to ask any questions they might have. So if anyone wanted to and didn't fill out a yellow slip, let me know. If you have any specific budget questions.
Rob? I would say maybe that time of question, would that be more appropriate after the presentation by staff? Because the staff may be bringing up something about the budget that the public may have a question about.
Does staff have a specific presentation they're doing, or?
We do have a presentation, but we wanted to know if you would like us to do the whole presentation to the board.
I don't have any problem with what Ken's saying, if that's.
Okay,
Does
absolutely.
the board feel that that's the best way to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
hold your question, you might have another one.
Or you might have none, if I do it well. Okay, so I'm gonna stand up over there, just because I feel more comfortable standing and presenting. So we're looking at the 1920 proposed budget. I call it proposed because it's not official final until later on in the meeting when you hopefully adopt the resolution that authorizes it. So we're going to be looking at the operating budget changes from the preliminary that was presented in June. Also the operating budget 4-year projection, capital projects, debt service, ASB, Associated Student Body, Transportation Vehicle Fund, which is TVF, and then also what those final next steps are for the budget. So these are the legislative impacts. These are the same impacts that were spelled out in the preliminary budget. Some big ones, salary allocation increases about 2%. So just changes in the way the account code and reporting is. You don't see those on the F-195 yet. They're not required for F-195 budget reporting until next year. But the requirement is in place for the year-end financials. Enrichment levy authority increased to $2.50 per thousand of assessed value. That begins in January 2020 on the calendar year. This budget that's presented tonight is based on $1.50 per thousand because that's the last decision that was made, or that was the last decision that was made for the board. And we haven't had a discussion or decided to change that, so I kept that the same. So it's $1.50. SEB, which is the new state insurance program, so that's a change in the employee benefit world. Certified professional development, there was one additional they funded for that. Another new requirement is paraeducator certification program, so there's a new requirement for us to provide 4 days total of training for paraeducation certification. And then another big one is K-3 class size compliance. So for the last year in 18-19, you were funded at 17 for kindergarten through 3rd grade class size. Now, starting in 19-20, if you do not have 17 in your class size, you don't get the maximum funding. So one of the things that we did was hire additional staff to support that need so that you guys could get that additional funding. And if you guys have questions, I'd almost rather you ask them as we go, unless they're going to be kind of long, so we can get through it. But I also know how it is with questions. Sometimes you forget them. So, okay, so budget initiatives, obviously develop a fiscally sound operating budget and forecast. That's very important. Comply with local, state, and federal mandates, also very important. Following OSPI accounting requirements, maintaining district programs, and compliance with EL5. So these are the major changes from 18-19 that I'm aware of. As you guys know, I came in late in the game, so there could potentially be more changes I'm just unaware of and think is status quo. So big one, the school breakfast program, breakfast in the classroom, breakfast after the bell, whatever we like to call it. So that's a pretty big major change for us structurally. And the support of the MMS turnaround, support of facility needs and addressing projects, support of technology and infrastructure, elementary staffing, and that K-3 class size compliance that I was just talking about. Support of the structural change at DOHS and incorporating back that ALE alternative learning model. Support of class offerings at MMS and DOHS, and support of the preschool and special education program.
When you say supportive class offerings at McFarland and at Othello High, is that meaning more?
So it's DOHS, not Othello High, just clarification.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
So last year at least at DOHS, there was, I think it was art that was being taught by a high school staff member during prep, and just with scheduling, that didn't work out this year. And Pete can talk more about that.
Yeah, we offered fine arts the last couple of years at DOHS in a shared model. We also offered foreign language, Spanish instruction at DOHS. I know our former student rep shared those challenges that came up at that school. And with the tiered model that was presented for DOHS for next year, the items that Josh Tovar came in and shared and said, we're going to capture more kids here. That means they needed more staffing. Well, we also had more kids at Othello High School. So Principal Vergara had to offer some additional Spanish, which meant we lost the Spanish support at DOHS. The arts program is growing quite consistently at OHS, so we had to offer more sections there. And we also shrunk the staffing at MMS in a couple of particular areas to accommodate the art specialists at the elementaries, that big move. So it's really been a K-12 impact to talk about all these staffing changes. Long story short, The kids at DOHS needed fine arts and access to a foreign language, so we have someone half-time doing that. We also needed some additional support because of a more significant loss in staffing at MMS, and so we created a shared position between those two sites.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so this is an enrollment comparison, and I have for you comparing the 18-19 average, which is what we're funded on currently for one last month of August, and then the 19-20 projections. So the way it works is if you look at kinder for 18-19, that class is actually going down to first grade, so you kind of have to read diagonally to compare your classes. So overall, 91.6 FTE increase. Our kindergarten classes are quite a bit bigger than our senior classes, so that's mostly what that is. You just see those higher enrollment grades in the lower levels that are kind of rolling through the system. So this is the revenue projection. So a total revenue of $67.67 million. I guess any specific questions on the revenue piece? Okay. So this is a view of our expenditures. This is looking at it by what I call cost item. So certified salaries, classified salaries, benefits, and then supplies, operating costs, and travel is all lumped in together at the bottom. And capital outlay is in there as well. It looks a little funny, but there's a method to the madness. The percentage of revenues is there for you guys to compare so that you have just the percentage of revenues comparison to EL5, because that's what EL5 is used with, is percentage of revenues, not expenditures. But you can see our total expenditures are very close to our revenues.
On the total employee counts,
Mm-hmm.
does that include, like under the classified, does that include like all the bus drivers, maintenance?
Yes. Yeah, it's
And
all
everybody?
staff, admin, everybody.
Okay.
There's a lot of information on that slide. Sorry. So this is a viewpoint of, I guess, more activity-based. So what are people doing? Teaching, instructional support, administration, things like that. So this is a view of that. You have the 19-20 projected budget, proposed budget, and then the percentage of the total budget expenditures-wise. You see that total equals 100%. And then just for comparison purposes, the 18-19 figures as well for those same categories for the budget.
If you can save it, write it down, definitely you'll have an opportunity to. Thanks. I mean, you wanted
I don't make the rules.
You wanted our clarification now, but then we'll have the opportunity for the public to ask questions after your presentation. Right?
Yeah, that works. No worries.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so this is basically a summary of the information you received in the slides before and from the preliminary budget presented in June. There's now a number in that projected beginning fund balance box that was blank before. So projecting ending the 18-19 year and starting the next school year at roughly $14 million. And you see the summary of the projected revenue, projected expenditures. We also are projecting or budgeting a $5 million transfer from general fund to capital projects to support the district's facility needs. There's been a lot of discussion around facilities lately, and so we wanted to put that in the budget just for consideration. Just because it's in the budget doesn't mean we have to do it. It's just a budget. It just gives us the authority, right? So that's in there. It's not a like signed, sealed, delivered thing. It's just in the budget, gives us the option to do it. Sorry, Talia. And then just at the bottom for your guys' reference, that 10% of revenues for your board policy. So this is the operating budget four-year enrollment projection. And as you guys know with enrollment, you can project all you want, but you never know until the kids walk through the door, right? So this is simply a projection. I've used pretty much the same methodology that I used for the 1920. So just forecasting out as you guys see the enrollment grows year after year after year, which is due to our lower grades having that higher enrollment count than our higher grades. So just a summary of the revenue projections and the expenditure projections for the next 4 years. I know it's a lot of information on one slide, but I wanted to just kind of condense it down so you guys could just see it all at once instead of having to flip through and all of that fun stuff. So levy, I pretty much kept it the same. I adjusted it for an estimation of assessed values because our assessed values typically go up every year. State revenue, state general purpose revenue, I increased by an inflationary value and then also adjusted it for that increase in enrollment that you were seeing on the other slide. Just to kind of give it hopefully a more accurate picture. I think the more thought you can put into it, the better. Again, obviously it's just a forecast, but. And then expenses, very similarly, I did inflationary values on the staffing costs and the benefit costs. And then I did some minor adjustments on the supplies and other operating cost categories. And then just due to enrollment increases, I did show a slight increase over time in the certified and classified staffing FTEs just because we're getting more students. Hopefully. So this is just a summary of the operating statement projection fund balance wise for those 4 years. And so as you guys see, bottom line, the fund balance is slightly increasing, and that is mostly due to your increasing enrollment. So this is a slide that is required by the state. Now we can check the box off that we did this. So I'm required to disclose to you guys what the estimated amount of MSOC is, which is miscellaneous supply and other costs. So it's to cover supplies, curriculum, books, that kind of stuff. So $5.2 million, our total amount that we are proposing to spend in this budget is $7.9 million. Basically, all the law requires is that if there's a difference between those two values, that we have to disclose that to you. If it's a positive value, meaning that you aren't proposing to spend as much as you're getting, then you have to basically state what you're using that for. But you guys are not in that case and not in that situation like most school districts, so that's all I have to disclose. Unless there's questions, obviously. So this is just a quick summary of the other funds that are in the budget and what's going on with them. Capital projects is used to record the major facility additions, remodeling, and major repairs for the school district. And one of the things that the school district has and was granted a couple years ago, I believe it was, is a K-3 class size reduction grant to build or create more classrooms for kindergarten through 3rd grade. And so we have budgeted and planned for that project for 1920 with hopes that we do. And then also, and that's a state grant. And then also that transfer that I mentioned previously, that $5 million is budgeted as well. Debt service fund, that is used to pay for the principal and interest of the district's voted and non-voted debt. And so the remaining amount on that debt is $18.3 million. And that's as of September 1st. So the ASB fund is used to record revenues and expenditures for student activities. They are for kids, by kids, all of that good stuff. So the 18-19 budget and the 19-20 budget and ASB are not the same. I'm sorry I did not update that sentence on the slide. But obviously you'll be able to tell that they're not the same. But the ASB budget is at the secondary levels, so MMS and up is all done by the students. So transportation vehicle fund, that is used to purchase yellow buses that drive kids around to and from school. And so it also can cover like any major repairs, like if an engine blows up, things like that. And so we budgeted for that as well. Okay, capital projects. I just went ahead into the 4-year projection, so you guys get all of it in one slide. So as I mentioned before, we're budgeting for the K-3 class size grant, and then also that $5 million that's transferred from the general fund. So I included all of that in the budget just so we have that authority to spend if we need to. But I only included it in the first year. Okay, so debt service fund. Pretty much all that goes into it is tax collections to pay off the bond debt for the district. So it's pretty simple. So again, I just included that as a flat revenue piece. There's not a prescribed amount that you have to collect or required to collect, or $1 per thousand or anything. There's no requirement like that. So I kept that revenue flat. And then the projected expenditures are the amounts that you guys will have to pay for principal and interest in those years. ASB, as I mentioned, is all done, at least, like I said, MMS and up is done by the students. And so those are the values. Obviously, elementaries are included as well. Those are the values that are in there. Just because I think the advisors and kids would probably hate us if we asked them for a 4-year projection. Most districts typically keep that pretty flat. I can just imagine a bunch of kids rolling their eyes at me. Okay, so TVF, Transportation Vehicle Fund, purchase of yellow buses. So the money that goes into this fund is the depreciation funds that the state reimburses us from the purchase of those yellow school buses. So when you buy a bus, there's basically a useful life, and you get paid out a certain amount per year for that useful life. And so as you can kind of see, our revenue is projected to be pretty flat for the next few years. And then the expenditures, I budgeted very similarly to what you had in 18-19. The plan right now is to buy 2 buses. And I believe that's in your regular agenda packet. But I like to budget it a little bit higher, just in case something happens. You never know.
Does that include all district vehicles or solely buses?
Just yellow school buses. If you want a
Is
pink
that
one, you can't buy it.
But I'm talking also like the maintenance vehicles?
Nope.
No, that's only buses?
Yep.
That okay. So those vehicles and that's in the...
That's in the
other
operating,
portion,
yeah, the general fund.
Okay.
So next steps, hopefully a board adoption today, and then as was mentioned before, the submission to OSPI on August 31st. Only 2 things, I like it. Okay, questions now. And Rob, however you want to do it.
Well, since we have an opportunity we could hold our questions if we want to allow the public to ask theirs. That way, if we run out of time, we can ask ours in our next meeting. So if we want to prioritize public questions, I know there's one specifically that you got on the tip of your tongue, right? George, if you want to come up and ask. We all have to have you come up because of the recording.
Yeah, I'm George Colley. I was just wondering what was contained in the transportation budget. What's inside that?
Are you talking about the,
Not for the buses.
Okay.
The transportation fund.
yeah, so the transportation operating budget, which is what I'm assuming you're talking about.
The travel, I'm sorry. Yes, the travel fund.
Can you, George, can you talk into your
Oh, I'm
mic
sorry.
so that,
I'm sorry,
thank you.
I got a little nervous. The travel fund.
So the travel
Or
fund.
is that be transportation, I believe?
Travel expense category, is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about?
Supplies, operating costs, and travel.
I'm sure what Tyson said is what you're referring to.
Right. It was like over $1 million. I was wondering what was in there.
Under the expenses, that last line under
Oh.
expenses.
So that's not just travel, just for clarification. So that is supplies, operating costs, which is lease contracts for copy machines, contract services. So just an example, our special ed department contracts a lot of services for SLPs, I think we have, and
I
psychologists.
think I'd like to know
and
what's in the just under travel.
just under travel, so
Yes.
that includes costs for conference travel, so for staff to go to conferences. It also includes like inter-district travel. We have secretaries and things that have inter-district mileage.
But George, are you referring
for a
to, you
dollar
want to
amount?
know the number?
Well, I think, wasn't the number over $1 million?
Um,
Am I mistaken there?
Let
So
me look.
like in the
believe so.
F-195, I think
It's
is
in there
what
though,
you're
George.
asking.
There's a line
for.
item, we'll be able to get you that.
Right in the bottom, transportation.
Okay, so you want transportation.
Transportation is different than travel.
Well, let me have them both then.
Okay.
Or what's in each one of them?
Okay, so we'll go with transportation first.
Okay,
So that is the cost to transport our students to or from home
okay,
to school
Okay.
and back home.
okay.
Travel
Yeah.
is, as I was just describing, so it's
Okay.
the cost for staff to go to trainings. It's also the cost of inter-district mileage. Some of our contractual services, we have to pay them mileage because they come from out of
Sure.
town, things like that.
So I'm gonna, dollar amount, I'm gonna go by memory on this.
sorry.
300,000, was
Yes.
that what I remember?
That's very
Okay.
good.
So around 300,000 per year for
Okay,
travel.
thank you.
Thanks, George. Now, we gotta figure it out.
Do you still have a question too?
Yeah,
You have
come
to
up.
talk into a mic.
So I don't really know like process and stuff like that. But I wrote down a couple of things that I'm curious about.
Can you
And
talk into your
I
mic
wrote
so that,
down a
thank
couple
you.
of things about that I'm curious about as you were presenting. And I don't know if this is like the appropriate time to ask or if it's strictly just budget, but I at least want to put it out there so that we're thinking about it. So for some of the things, I guess, that are proposed, enrichment sub-funds, I wanted to see how much money is allocated for that. I'm assuming it's for like our subs that get hired on for training and stuff like that, properly train them, right?
So, so that's a very good question because I think it's good for the board to know too. So the enrichment sub-fund is where your levy funds are going to be going. So a couple years ago, right, they changed. You can't call it an M&O levy. It's called an enrichment and operations levy. I think EP&O or something. So that's where that money goes, along with the LEA. So your levy equalization, that goes in there too. So anything that's local dollars goes into the enrichment sub-fund. So it's not necessarily just subs, which is very confusing. But it's enrichment, so athletics. It also covers, so the state only funds a certain number of positions, and most districts have to staff over that to really effectively serve students well. And so the cost of those additional positions goes in there as well. So it's not just subs, it's very confusing.
So when you say athletics, does this mean like the coaches get paid out of this fund and
Yes.
stuff like that? So, okay, so that's good to know that that's where it comes out of, but also I want to maybe suggest that we do start doing something for subs that maybe aren't familiar with the district. I'm familiar with the district because I work at Wahidas 2013 through 15 school years for 2 years. So I'm familiar when I came back as a sub in 2017. being familiar with the district and comfortable with a lot of the students and staff, it's very, very hard to adjust and really know what you're doing. So I think if we do have some kind of fund that supports substitute whoever comes in, whether it's a janitor or a teacher or a para, for them to be properly trained on what to do, how to handle these IEPs and all these things, that shouldn't be new news to them. They should be aware of some of our kids with, you know, disorders, learning disorders, or even like social emotional disorders and stuff like that. They shouldn't come in and like, oh, I'm so lost, but hey, I got hired. That's how I was like, cool, I'm gonna stay for a little while, talk to Mr. Perez about it, you know, this is my plan, blah, blah, and I'm headed back to Atlanta. Here I am almost 2 years later. I love these kids. But, you know, just to like share that with you guys, like we need something for these people coming into our district to even want to stay. Like we need, you know, obviously there's needs in our district, so I think that would really help. Yeah, and so my next thing, there's a paraeducator certification program. I wanted to know a little bit more about what that entails. I know you did mention like with the teachers, they did get an extra paid day. FYI, just throwing out there, I work summer school 7 hours a day. Huge difference in my pay from 6.5 hours a day to 7 hours a day, and we're putting in the time anyways. So just anyways, yeah. So I wanted to see, like, I know there's not a lot for paras. That's my position as a paraeducator at Desert Oasis, and I am the only one there because our school is a lot smaller. But I think we could use another one if that, you know, becomes available for funding. But so I wanted to see what that program was and how much really is allocated in that fund as well, and what are we using that money for? Because I have yet to receive enough, you know, like, I don't know, I guess a full training, but I feel like I'm good because I've been here. But when coming on board, even in 2013, if it wasn't for Mrs. Fuller, I would have been very lost, you know. So some kind of training.
Yeah. So I can speak to the paraeducator training a little bit, just on a high level, because it's very new and we still are kind of trying to figure it out, right? But so a couple years ago, the legislature put forth a requirement for us to implement this and do paraeducator training, basically. So the legislature has funded 2 days, and that is set to be paid out next summer. But the requirement is for us to provide those 2 days during the 1920 school year. So we'll be providing those 2 days. What that is working towards is what's called a Fundamental Course of Study Certificate, FCS certificate. And that's now basically a job requirement for paras. They have to have that certification to be a paraeducator. So it's essentially a job requirement. Lovely. Thank you, legislature. Which is good, though, right? The paras get that additional training, which is awesome, which sounds like what you're asking for. So there will be definitely more information coming out on that. Like I said, we're still trying to figure out exactly what that looks like and how it works, because paras will be paid for that training,
No,
and so we
the
have to figure out
training's
when.
The training's actually 4 days, but the state only approved to pay or reimburse for 2, right?
Yes, during this year, with the intention of funding the other 2 next year. So that's why they said we're only required to do 2 this year, and then it'll be 2 the next year.
She said 2 in the summer, I think I heard you.
No,
right?
reimbursed.
Yeah, that's when the money would
Your
come.
pay is reimbursed, or,
Yeah.
I'm
Got
sorry.
it.
When the plans are put in place for that, for what our district will be doing, could you come back to the board with more information on that? So that
Absolutely.
hopefully paras will have a clue before us, but we would like to know too, and
Yeah.
the public as well. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, definitely.
I know that's not your realm, but
It's all
she's
my
not
realm,
here
isn't it?
either. You're right, it is all your realm.
We have lots of clues. It's just putting them together where we could use more assistance.
Yeah.
But I think that's really awesome. I know it's a lot of legalities that come with it, and I'm sure you guys do a great job of analyzing and, you know, putting that all together to make sense for us. But I think it's a very positive thing. It is a big drastic change, but I think that like we need it. Like we can't just come out here and like freestyle it until we figure it out, which we do a good job of. It's great. It's, you know, working, but it could work a lot better with effective training, you know, the right kind of training.
Yeah.
Even if it is a couple of days, I'm so down for it.
Thank you. I have to point out that you're quite a bit over your 3 minutes, so
Oh,
in
I'm
case there's
so
somebody
sorry.
else that wants to,
I'm so sorry.
that wants to comment.
I have one more question, but if somebody else wants to take it, might have to come back.
Is there anybody else? You're on then, go for it.
And I was looking at the time, like, don't go past, like 7 o'clock. Okay, so my other question that jumped out to me, community programs, I seen allocated $8,000. What type of community programs are those, and when it comes to planning, may I be a part of that? Or even helping, it doesn't have to be planning, but I would like to be a part of that, whatever kind of community programs that we have set up, or if I could help implement some things I've been thinking of, but I don't know.
So that is additional revenue. And so that is from like facility rentals and just the district basically being a host of community programs.
And
Yeah.
so that's what we get from
Yes.
people doing that. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So it's not like, hey, we have this fund to like support our kids in the community, to do programs that kind of catch. I know we have a big athletics thing, like our athletics department is very heavily supported and financed, and that's great. But a lot of our kids are not in athletics, they're not in church, they're running the streets doing things that we don't want them, to be exposed to too much longer. So if we can like have some kind of conversation at least about getting some type of after-school programs. I know we have after-school homework clubs and there's tutoring at MMS through Gear Up. So there are some things, but we're missing a lot of our kids. And it's not that they don't want to be found, it's that we haven't found a way to get to them quite yet, so, yeah.
Thank you. And Jeanette, if you could scroll back up, I want to talk a little bit about this. There's a slide there that broke it down. It was actually there. Go back up. Just to clarify on this slide, and also to ask you before I say it if I'm right, this just breaks it down really based on EL5, right?
Yes.
So EL5, the board policy EL5 has stated that there will be a cap of 80% of our budget to go toward salaries and benefits. And so really what you see there is salaries, benefits, and then supplies, operating costs, and travel is just everything else. That's the 20% that's left.
Mm-hmm.
And that was based on, we looked back historically and found that that was the average, right around 80%. We found that it was pretty average for other school districts as well. And so we want to make sure when it comes to negotiations, those kind of things, that there was an understanding of what that would be, that 80%. And so I think that helps also the negotiating team to know kind of where they're at with negotiations. So just for the public to know, that's why that was broken out that way. I think so the board could see that they're within that range. Okay. Any other questions from the community or comments regarding the budget? Go ahead, you gotta come up though.
Cheryl Schweitzer from the Columbia Basin Herald. Are you guys in negotiations this year? I thought you had a 3-year contract?
PSC negotiations,
Okay,
not
thank you.
certificate.
All right, thank you.
Okay. We do have about 5 minutes for transition, so if there's no questions, I think it's probably a good idea to just take a recess here, and then we'll start our regular meeting at 7. All right.